They say you can't surprise the dead. But on the morning of my husband's funeral, I learned that the man I was burying had 2 other wives. The discovery came dressed in black silk and trembling hands. She arrived just before the service began, tall, elegant, wearing grief like a veil she didn't quite earn. When our eyes met across the pews, something in her expression fractured the air between us. "Are you Clara Bennett?" she asked after the service, voice soft as a secret. "Yes," I said, clutching my clutch like it was armor. "I'm Mark's wife." She blinked once, then twice. "So am I." At first I thought it was grief madness, that cruel disorientation that makes people say strange things in times of loss. But then she produced a marriage certificate with his signature on it. Same name, same handwriting, different state. I didn't even have time to process before a third woman stepped forward. Younger, eyes wide with the same horror I must have shown. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but I'm his wife too." That's the moment my world stopped being real. The 3 of us, me, Elena, and Sophie, sat in a roadside diner hours later, each of us staring into a coffee cup like it held the truth. "He said he worked in logistics," Sophie said. "Always on business trips." Elena laughed, bitter and sharp. "He told me finance. Spent half the month in Nashville. Guess I know why." I swallowed hard. He told me he was a consultant, that he needed to travel often. 3 women, 3 states, 3 lives carefully braided together by one man, my husband. The man whose face still looked angelic in the open casket that morning. I should have felt anger. Instead, I felt cold calculation take root. Because if Mark had lived 3 lives, he must have left clues. And if there were clues, I was going to find them. We began comparing everything. Credit card statements, phone numbers, memories that once felt private but now seemed like codes. The more we pieced together, the more impossible it seemed that one man could juggle it all. The lies were intricate, almost mechanical, until Elena found the first crack. "He rented a storage unit in Savannah," she said one night. "It's still active. I think we should check it." We drove there in silence. Inside, among boxes of old clothes and receipts, was a ledger, handwritten, meticulous. Every page was about us. "Clara prefers jasmine tea. Never tell her about Elena." Elena, questioning lately. "Buy bracelet." Sophie, afraid of storms. "Call during thunder." He'd mapped us like a scientist studying specimens. Love reduced to logistics. Intimacy turned into inventory. And at the very end, one final entry chilled my blood. "They're closing in. Need to move funds before it's too late. If anything happens, the key is under the oak." The oak led us to his old cabin in North Carolina, the one he told me he sold years ago. The air smelled of rotten rain when we reached it. Behind the cabin, half hidden in the mud, stood a massive oak tree with roots like claws gripping the earth. We dug beneath it until metal scraped against metal, a tin box. Inside were a flash drive, a key, and a note written in his unmistakable hand. "If you found this, it means I couldn't get away. I never meant to hurt you. But I had to stay alive." Alive from what? The flash drive revealed financial records, encrypted files, and references to a man named P. Dalton. Offshore accounts, shell companies, codes. The puzzle no longer looked domestic. It looked criminal. That night, as thunder cracked above the cabin, we realized Mark Bennett hadn't just been a liar. He'd been hiding. The FBI agent we brought the files to didn't look surprised. "Is wary. Where did you get this?" he asked. "From my husband," I said, every word bitter on my tongue. The agent exchanged a glance with his partner. "Ma'am, your husband was living under multiple aliases. He was part of a federal witness protection case, one that went sideways." I stared. "You mean he wasn't really Mark Bennett?" "No, ma'am," the agent said softly. "That name died 15 years ago. 15 years. Before I even met him. All those anniversaries, those Sunday mornings, those whispered promises before sleep, they belonged to a man who didn't exist. I wasn't a widow. I was just another chapter in his cover story. The authorities confiscated everything. They told us not to contact each other, not to dig deeper. But grief has a way of ignoring orders. Months later, I received a plain envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single photograph of Mark. Alive. standing on a crowded street in Lisbon, smiling at whoever took the picture. On the back, in his handwriting, "I had to disappear again. Forgive me if you can." I stared at it for a long time before feeding it to the fire. As I finally understood, he wasn't three different men. He was none. And I, Clara Bennett, widow, wife, fool, would not let him write me out of my own story again.